second period. Let's see. There's, like I said, there's been a lag. All right. So our warm up for today, if this will ever open up, well, okay, before we get to that, just as a reminder, Module 9, Lesson 7, the notebook, we completed those in class. The videos from last week are loaded into our live session from last week, where I went through all of the questions in the notebook and the course arc. I gave you the link to the Kahoot review for the quiz as well as the review sheet. Module 9, Lesson 6, the course arc and notebook closed on the 31st. The quiz is open until tomorrow. And remember, that's a summative, so that's a big one, okay? Your EverFi, your Startup to IPO, remember that is open until tomorrow. Same with the Life of a T-shirt, that is open until tomorrow. The quiz, the EverFi, and the Life of a T-shirt are all summative grades. So make sure you get those done. They'll close at 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. But those are the really big ones, right? Because they're 90% of your grade. Okay. Let's see. And then as a quick little reminder for your EverFis, and this is for every single EverFi that you do, I need to have those 3 items in here. I need to have the tab that says this is the lesson that you're on, the assessment grade, and I also need to see your name. You see where the arrows are on there? I need to see all 3 of those for you guys to get full credit or credit for whatever percentage you made. Okay, that's just a quick little review. I keep putting these in here and showing them so that they will be on the recordings just in case you need to go back and look. Okay. All right, so standards, we're talking about changes in supply and demand. We're talking about globalization and how it's impacted various aspects of economic growth, rights of citizen, labor market, environments, and income distribution. Okay. All right, so our warm up for today, it's the start of National Bake Week. I said, what do you guys like to bake? But I guess I should first ask, do any of you guys like to bake? And if you do, what do you like to bake? And you guys can either type it in the chat or you can unmute. I'm hoping this means that people are typing. I hope. Brownies. Oh, I love brownies. I love brownies. What about the rest of you guys? Monkey bread. Wow. Okay. Oh, you just got some cake mix, Franchon? All right. Oh, banana bread. I love banana bread. My mom used to make like the best banana bread. Cheesecake. Okay, so here's my question, Melissa. Do you make New York style cheesecake, or do you make what's called French silk cheesecake, which is more like a pie? New York style. That's a process. So that's really kudos to you, Melissa. That is amazing. Brownies, Michael, absolutely. Have any of you guys ever eaten what's called a brookie? Or do you know what I'm talking about when I say a brookie? You know, Michael, William, yeah? It's the cookie and brownie mix. So I did not know what a brookie was until, I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago. I'd never had them. I had no clue. And I had a friend who made them. And yeah, those are one of my favorite things now. Not that I can eat a lot of them because I, would go into like a sugar coma, but oh my goodness. Anybody have anything else they like to make? No, can't think of anything. All right, so let's go into standard of living. So I've got a couple of videos. I've got some links here that I'm going to go through with you guys. You actually, and I'll open up the actual project. We'll open that up in just a minute because there is a link. You have a set of notes. I've shown you a document just so you know kind of like what you're looking for, but there is a link. It's the blue hyperlink to this document that you're going to click on and make your own copy of. So we'll get to that one in just a moment. Let's do our defining video for standard of living first. Hopefully this will work like it should. Maybe. Oops, let me mute myself.
Hey everyone, it's Mr. McCluskey back again with another video, and today we're going to be looking at what the definition and meaning of standard of living is. We're going to look at a couple key words that relate to it. How do we determine it? I'm actually pretty excited about this lesson, and I'm really hoping you guys are too.
Oh, you can stay, but I'm leaving.
Okay. Not that excited. So, but we still have to do this lesson. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so what is standard of living? Well, according to the internet, it says it is the level of wealth, comfort, material goods, and necessities available to certain socio-economic class or a certain geographic area.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, it might seem pretty complicated, but it's not. To make this easier, we're going to simplify this down a little bit. So what standard living is, it's the quality of life in a country based on 3 factors. And those factors are GDP per capita, literacy rate, and life expectancy. So what is GDP per capita? Well, before we understand what GDP per capita is, we really need to take a look at what GDP means. And GDP is short for gross domestic product. And we don't mean gross in the sense of when I was in elementary school and I threw up over like 7 kids who were sitting in front of me. Yeah, not like that gross. We mean in the sense of total. Gross means total in this case. To keep it simple, GDP is basically the wealth of a country. How much money a country makes through goods and services in a year. Now that we understand what GDP is, let's take a look at GDP per capita. Now, GDP per capita is the average amount of money a person will make in a year within a country.
Good morning, my darlings. You're coming home with me.
GDP per capita is basically considered the average income of a person in a country. The next factor is literacy rate. Now, literacy rate is the percentage of the population that's over the age of 15 that can read and write within a certain country. Now, when you come across these numbers, you're going to see numbers in the 90s and then you might see below 90. A lot of these countries that you see that might have low literacy rates might have different roadblocks to promoting education, the access to get an education, or the ability for families to allow their children to go to school. Sometimes in some places, you do have it where children need to work in order to be able to bring home an income for families. And the last factor we're going to talk about is life expectancy. Now, life expectancy is simply how long the average life will be within a country. How old the average person will live to be. And that's it. That's all the factors of the standard of living. I'm hoping that part was pretty easy.
Yes!
Good. But let's not get too excited. We do have one more thing to go over.
Please, no! 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 No!
Yeah, we got to look at how do we determine a standard of living using the GDP, literacy rate, and life expectancy. So let's go ahead and get into that. Okay, so let's make this quick. So how do we determine standard of living? Well, the first thing we need to do is look at the chart. As we look at the chart, you will see that you have a list of countries, then you have categories of GDP per capita, life expectancy, and literacy rate. Now, if you look at each one of these, what you will do is you're going to rank each country based on each category. So let's start with GDP per capita. You look at that category and you try to find who has the highest. According to this, the country that has the highest is Japan. So next to that number at 46,831, you would put a 1. Then the second country that's closest is the United States. The third would be Russia. And finally, Mali would be in 4th place in this. Then you do the same thing for life expectancy. Find the highest and then rank them from highest to lowest, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you do the same thing with literacy rate. Now, sometimes you'll actually have it where countries will be the exact same. They might tie, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you go through this, you're going to end up having 3 numbers. You add those 3 numbers up, and they're going to give you a raw score, and that's how you rank them. The lowest raw score is the country that has the highest standard of living. The highest raw score is the country that has the worst standard of living. And that's it. That's everything you need to know about standard of living for this lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment below, let me know, thumbs up if you like it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Give me a second here. Okay, think I got that stopped. I'm so sorry about the lagging, guys. I'm not sure why I'm having so many technical issues today, but we're just going to do the best that we can to get through this, okay? So hopefully you kind of got the idea when we're talking about standard of living. We're looking at multiple things in a country, right? We're looking at how people are living. And some of those things deal with how much money they make. Some of them deal with, we're talking about literacy rate and why literacy rate. Because remember, the better that you can read and write, the better job that you can have, the better life you can have because you're making more money. There's other things that we also look at as well when we're talking about standard of living, like healthcare. Education's big, healthcare's big. Per capita GDP, remember, gross domestic product divided by the number of people in a country. That's what per capita means. So those are the different things that we look at when we're talking about, you know, standard of living. All right, so let me open up, hopefully, open up the notes. Fingers crossed. And these are the notes that are also in Canvas, guys, with the actual project itself, okay? So if, you know, we have any issues right here or you want to go back and look, these are the same notes that you have access to with the project, okay? All right, so what can you tell about standard of living in the top picture? Can you guys see anything? Luxury, okay. I mean, there's like a pool and a very large house, and it's really clean and it's beautiful, right? So would you think, if we're looking at the top picture, I mean, we're talking about pretty high standard of living? I mean, we could say that, right? Yeah, okay. Now let's look at the bottom. What does that picture show us in regards to standard of living? Can anybody tell me? And anything that you see in that bottom picture, what do you see? Anybody? Hopefully you guys are typing. And you can unmute if you want to. Anything. What do you see in that bottom picture? Can you see anything? I mean, look at the house. Is that like a really sturdily built house? Not really, right? Not super sturdy. It's kind of makeshift, right? A whole bunch of what looks like found items kind of cobbled together to make a house. There's dirt. It's not paved. Okay. So if we were to describe or put a title on the top picture, we would call that something from the developed countries, right? The developed. The bottom picture would be from the LDCs, or least developed countries, or developing countries, right? So what is development, right? Progress, the act of growing. How does it relate to human life? Should the world as a whole worry about development issues? And then do we have development issues around us in our community? Okay. So we know simple human development, right? You go from crawling to walking. Emotional development, talking about gender identity. Social development, the friendships that you make. You with me so far? I mean, those are simple, I think. So when we're talking about like different milestones and what you reach, who is responsible, and then what role does the government play in development? Well, you have to crawl before you can walk. So maybe if we're talking about on a world level, countrywide level, you need to educate before you can spring forward, right? You need your citizens, right? They need to be educated. They need to be able to read and write. Therefore, they can help you move forward. Who is responsible for providing these needs? Well, generally, right, most governments set up some type of educational system. So we have that available. Healthcare systems, things of those natures. It kind of depends on the country as to what's available and what is not available. But for instance, here in the United States, right, we have health districts. So there's the Las Vegas Health District, Clark County Health District. So if we're talking health issues, we do have those available, right? And then, the government helps in regards to, say, like sewage and trash and clean water and roads and infrastructure, okay? So if you can see what these people are doing on the bottom, the picture in there is they're actually laying the tracks for a railroad, right? So transportation would be a big thing. So there's this thing called the HDI, the Human Development Index. And this was created by the United Nations to measure levels of development in countries. And it looks at 4 things. It looks at GDP per capita, the literacy rate, the education level, and then life expectancy. And when we talk life expectancy, that's where I'm talking about healthcare, right? If your infant mortality rate is high, meaning children aren't making it past a year, or people aren't living to old age, that means your healthcare issues, right? They're having issues. So that's what we mean by life expectancy. We have more developed countries and less developed countries, okay? So economic factors, gross domestic product per capita, So it's the value of total output of goods and services per population. Obviously, the higher GDP per capita, the better life people live. Your social factors like literacy rate, your percentage of country's people who can read and write, your education level, an analysis of the average amount of schooling, your demographic factors, life expectancy, the average number of years expected to live at time of birth. Okay. So as you can tell, just as a visual, right? The countries in green have a higher human development index. And if you'll notice, you see North America, Australia, like in the Pacific, and throughout Europe. They're all green. Those are where your more developed countries are. The red has your lowest human development index, right? In Pakistan, which is right next to India, and then mostly throughout Africa. And then in between, right? So you can see the less developed a country is, the lower their human development index score is. The more developed, the higher. That's just a visual, right, for that. You look at types of jobs that people have in their economic sectors. We've talked about primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Direct extraction of materials, it's the lowest form. That's primary, agriculture, mining, fishing. Secondary is like manufacturing. You're moving your way on up. Tertiary, providing goods and services. So retails, restaurants, bankings, doctors, etc. And then quaternary, that is at your highest level of development. That's research, development, etc. Productivity, value of a product compared to the amount of labor needed. So obviously in more developed countries, they have higher productivity because they have access to more technology. In LDCs, they have lower productivity because they have to rely on animal and manpower. So the United Nations role, largest ever meeting of world leaders in 2000. They discussed world development. They created the 8 goals to encourage development of social and economic conditions in the world's poorest countries. And you know what? I have this. Let's see if I can get this to down. Just because I don't want to go through all 8 goals. So let me, because you have that available to you. Okay, these are 2 things. I'm going to talk about goal 7 and goal 8. So goal 7 is ensure environmental sustainability. That was in our last course arc that we did for module 9, lesson 7. Remember, we talked about that. And then goal number 8, I can get this to actually develop a global partnership for world development. So that's where we start looking at the different world organizations. Okay, we looked at all of these in our last module 9, lesson 7. Okay, does everybody have their copy made for their standard of living project? Give me a thumbs up if you have your copy made. Guys, I need responses from you, please. I see William's got his up. Okay, Melissa, Kaylani. Okay. The rest of you guys, a couple more kiddos need to get theirs open. Is that what I'm seeing? Okay, Aiden has his up. I have where for some reason it's not letting me project to the next screen. So give me a moment, guys. All right, I may have to stop projecting and then reproject. Give me a moment here. Let's try this again. See, even teachers have all of these technological issues. Let's see if this will actually project now. There we go. All right. So as you said, everybody has their things open. Yes. Okay. So you should have noticed in the project, the very first thing was the PowerPoint that I went over with you guys, right? And then you made your copy. So what is one of the first things that it's asking you to do? Can somebody tell me? What is the first thing they're asking you to do?
Choose 3 countries.
Choose 3 countries. So where can we choose these countries from? Well, I've asked you guys to give me one developed country, one developing country, and one of the least developed countries. So let me see if I can get this to hop over so you can see. So in the World Population Review, it talks about what makes up a developed country versus developing versus least developed, okay? So you'll notice, just like the picture I showed you, the countries in dark blue would be developed. So you could pick America, right? You could pick Canada, any country in Europe, right? Anything that we see in here. I'm kind of highlighting like these countries right here. Anything in there. You could come down here to Australia or New Zealand. So can everybody pick a developed country really quick and type that into your document? And then give me a thumbs up when you've picked your country. Okay, hopefully everybody has picked their developed country. Okay. This also gives you like on that, like this site, hopefully this will pop up. These are the 10 most developed countries from 2021. Oops. All right, let me go back. I think I may have to reboot my other laptop. Sorry about that, guys. Because, yeah, it's just not going back to where I want it to go. All right. So developing. Remember in Module 9, Lesson 7, we were talking about those countries that hadn't reached developed, but were getting close, like Russia, China, Brazil, India, Mexico. Do you remember those? Those would be what we're talking about. Those are developing, right? They're a little bit closer. Not quite there, but a little bit closer. And then finally, your least developed countries. And with the exception of Brazil, pick any country in South America, pick any country in Central America, throughout the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, anything in there. And so at this point, hopefully you guys have your 3 countries picked, I hope. And I have another video. Maybe. Why did it do that? Okay.
Welcome to Academic Gain Tutorials. In this video, we will look into the differences between standard of living and quality of life. In simple words, the standard of living implies the level of welfare provided to the residents of a country. That is, it may refer to all those goods and services that people are able to consume and the resources they can access. On the contrary, quality of life indicates the welfare and well-being of a person or group. Standard of living is a quantifiable term, in the sense that it takes into account only material factors. Whereas, quality of life is a subjective assessment of how satisfied and contented people are, in a particular region or area. So, let's look into the basic differences between standard of living and quality of life in a tabular form. Difference number 1. Standard of living is used to refer to the level of income, necessities, services and other material well-being which are readily available to the people of a particular country. On the contrary, quality of life can be defined as the kind of life a person or group is living with regard to his or her physical and psychological well-being, independence and social associations. Number 2. Standard of living needs a macro perspective, as it talks about the way of living of the overall population in a particular geographical area, whereas quality of life needs a micro perspective, which considers the circumstances and perceptions of individuals. Number 3. The standard of living determines the material well-being of the citizens of a country, that is, the pursuit of comfort and luxury in life, whereas quality of life exhibits human well-being, that is, how happy, peaceful or satisfied a person is from his or her life. Number 4. The factors that affect the standard of living remains the same for all the countries, whereas the factors affecting the quality of life differs from one person to another. That is, the definition of quality of life for one person may not be the same for another person. Number 5. Standard of living is exclusively based on the level of income. That is, the higher the level of income, the higher would be the standard of living. In contrast, quality of life is not exclusively based on the level of income. That is, higher income would not necessarily mean better quality of life. And, difference number 6. Standard of living can be reflected through the level of consumption and purchasing power, wherein a higher level of consumption and purchasing power indicates a high standard of living, whereas quality of life can be reflected in the degree of freedom of choice, civil liberties, that is available to people.
I know that was really simple, but it was just kind of repeating what I had talked about. I have a second video that I'm going to show you, and then we're going to talk about your choices you're going to pick on how you're going to look for standard of living. So give me a moment.
Is real GDP per capita a good measure of the standard of living? People tell me all the time, you improve. Drop us an email or leave us some feedback on our website. Thanks.
If you want to test yourself, click Practice Questions. Or if you're ready to move on, you can click Go to
GDP per
Or if you're ready to move on,
Is real GDP per capita a good measure of the standard of living? People tell me all the time, you economists, you're too materialistic. Doesn't real GDP per capita just measure the things we buy? What about our health, our happiness, education? Well, real GDP per capita, it's not a perfect measure, but I want to show you why it's probably the best single measure of the average standard of living in a country. And that's not because material goods are the most important goods. It's because real GDP per capita is correlated with many of the other things that we care about. Let's start with life expectancy. Here we show real GDP per capita along the horizontal axis and life expectancy along the vertical axis. As you can see, there's a positive correlation. Countries that have a higher GDP per capita also have a higher life expectancy. Perhaps that's not too surprising. Let's take a look at happiness. Maybe this is a more surprising fact. This chart shows GDP per capita on the horizontal axis, and now a measure of happiness on the vertical axis. Again, we see a positive correlation. Countries with a higher real GDP per capita also tend to have happier people, on average. Here's a data set from the United Nations. It's called the Human Development Index. It combines measures of life expectancy, education, and standard of living. Overall, you can see, in general, as GDP per capita increases, so does human development, at least as measured by this index. The basic story, it's pretty simple. When we have more goods and services, we can usually afford more of the other good things in life. So the good things in life, they tend to go together. However, GDP per capita is far from perfect. Here's one problem. GDP per capita misses the distribution of income. For example, let's compare the real GDP per capita of Nigeria, Pakistan, and Honduras. It's actually pretty similar. So you might think that all three countries have similar living standards. And yet in Nigeria, about 80% of the population lives on less than $2 a day. In Pakistan, it's only 60%. In Honduras, it's only 33%. How can the number of people living in abject poverty be so different when real GDP per capita is about the same? The reason is that income in Nigeria is much more unequally distributed than in Pakistan or Honduras. Nigeria has many poor people, but also some very rich people. So average income, it's about the same in Nigeria, Pakistan, or Honduras, even though there are more poor people in Nigeria. Over time, however, growth in real GDP per capita, whether in Nigeria, Pakistan, or Honduras, usually does indicate growth in everyone's incomes, including the incomes of the very poor. So this graph shows growth in per capita incomes along the horizontal axis, with growth in the incomes of the poorest 20% on the vertical axis. Once again, you see, as average per capita income increases, you also see increases in income of the very poor. Overall, real GDP and real GDP per capita have proven to be useful measures for comparing the standard of living of two different countries or for comparing the same country at different points in time. Okay, so now that you know that real GDP per capita, it's a good measure of the standard of living, we get to the really crucial question. How do we increase the standard of living? How do we grow an economy?
All right, kiddos. So we are literally at the end of our class today. I just want to quickly remind you that tomorrow is attendance assignment. And remember, small group is tomorrow afternoon. So for those of you that need some extra help with me, I'm literally going to be sitting in that open meet from 12:30 to 2:30. So MVLA Rather SSG. Yes, I will send that in the remind text. It will also be on our announcements tomorrow. So if you need any help whatsoever, please come to the small group so that we can talk about whatever it is that you need help with. And so the only thing I ask that you guys do in preparation for class on Wednesday is start picking what you want to use to measure standard of living in the 3 countries that you picked today. And that's where we're at. And we're at the end of our class for today. If there's no other questions, you guys can go ahead and head on out. And I will see you tomorrow in small group if you need help.